This is Kevin Sherrington in the Morning News with the headline, Jerry, Stephen Jones want Cowboys to win. Non-football interests keep them from that goal. And it really evolves nicely into a piece about how sports ownership in DFW is diseased because of all the money and the fascination with marketing. And maybe Jerry set the tone for it, but it has absolutely become a trend and a bothersome trend here in DFW sports. Here's Sherrington. He goes, Nolan Ryan didn't own the Rangers, but he was the face of them as both a player and executive. Many of you still operate under the assumption he built the Rangers' first 2 World Series rosters, despite evidence to the contrary. Some of you just prefer to believe a legitimate Texas icon did it instead of a kid from Queens. He's referring to JD. The facts are Nolan simply didn't have time to build a roster, too busy selling beef and foundation repair and statewide brands. He didn't get to the office all that much. You'd like to think everyone could have made it work because it was a wonderful mix of talent, but Ray Davis ultimately decided the Rangers were better served with a president who could devote his full attention to that position because the owner certainly wasn't going to do it. Makes him unique in this market. As brilliant as Mark Cuban is, sure seems like he's got a lot going on with TV and untold business interests, not to mention a potentially groundbreaking pharmaceutical line, maybe even a presidential bid someday. Yet, with all that on his plate, he's still making personnel calls in the Mavs, or at least he was before the Adelsons bought out his majority interest. By the way, I want to salute Mark Cuban for understanding he was no longer up for the job.
That's true.
I think others would let their ego and their personal interests keep them in that role to the detriment of the franchise. And I think Mark Cuban was brilliant and self-aware. A couple of years ago, he said, I'd never sell the team because that's how much he loved it. But he knew he couldn't give all to it anymore, and he only wanted to do it on his terms. So what did he do? He sold it. Thank you, Mark. I wish Jerry would do the same thing. Sherrington continues, if I had one complaint about Cuban's reign, it's that there never seemed to be a coherent long-range plan unless you count chasing free agents who ultimately weren't caught. Meanwhile, the Spurs and Heat created cultures as well as identities. In just 3 years, Brad Stevens reinvented the Celtics. Sam Presti built a colossus in OKC, tore it down, built another. Cuban could never quite bring himself to raise his roster and start all over again. He kept trying patches right up to the present model. Would the Mavs be better off now if Cuban had hired a good GM and let him do his job unfettered by the owner's interference? Only seems logical that a person in charge who spends every waking hour thinking about improving his team would enjoy an advantage over someone who has other things on his mind. It is just that freaking simple.
Wow.
Same goes for Jerry, who unfortunately bought the Cowboys so he could run them. This he did in the image of his hero, Al Davis. Once upon a time, a visionary such as Davis could make it work, but NFL teams are no longer mom-and-pop organizations. Might explain why the Raiders, like the Cowboys, mostly look back fondly at the good times. And what exactly is that image? Players around the league will tell you the Cowboys are more style than substance, brand over football. That's not to say Jerry doesn't care about winning, because he does. He wants, above all else, to prove he can win a Super Bowl without Jimmy, and he also wants to win because winning sells. Selling shouldn't be the concern of a GM, writes Sherrington in his conclusion, who should be preoccupied with winning instead. No one's got enough brain for both. Takes all I've got just to get through this column. And salute to you, sir. I had never really connected all those dots in that fashion, but you know, it's well stated, you know, that we've seen this exact problem play out with 2 other organizations, Nolan Ryan and Mark Cuban. I never even thought of the Nolan Ryan angle. That, hey, you just shouldn't have a power either autonomously or, you know, along with John Daniels if you're going to be so interested in business sides of the operations. I know it ticked off Parcells to no end when he didn't know if he was dealing with football Joneses or stadium Joneses at a given time.
Yeah, he understood that working through Steven was the best way to attack anything. You know, he said, you know, Jerry's a totally different animal, but he understood working with Steven. Me personally, I didn't realize that Nolan Ryan was kind of an absentee leader, president, whatever you wanted to call him. I didn't realize he was. I knew he was involved with products and selling things.
Yeah, that beef ain't gonna pack itself.
But I didn't realize that it was to that extreme. That's. I felt like that. Okay. Because all we talked about was old baseball guy and why old baseball guy needs to be here. You know, that's what. But if in fact that he wasn't around, that's interesting to me. I didn't think that
old baseball guy is what we needed, but you just needed focused old baseball guy. I think.
Yeah, he had too much other things outside of baseball that he was committing to, and that's very much like what Jerry is about.
Let me ask you this: if this football team, as it wins 12 games every year, and finds a way to get in the playoffs but gets beat, but wasn't worth $10 billion, would we think of the Joneses differently?
If they were broke?
They're still billionaires. Say their team's only worth $3 billion or $6 billion.
Just whatever the NFL average is.
Yeah, but their team's worth 10. They're the most profitable or highest, whatever the cost, whatever you want to call it, the most for a franchise. They're the most expensive franchise in the history of the world here. Would we think of the Joneses differently as far as caring about business and all that if they were say the Cincinnati Bengals?
I think so, because
if they were the Brown family,
if they weren't that good at business, if they weren't that preoccupied with business, and they still just stunk, then they wouldn't have a good excuse for being this bad.
They win. They're in the playoffs and they win 12 games every year or 10 games every year.
You'd basically be like Marvin Lewis's Bengals.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. To me, the teams that really suck are like Arizona. We've seen it with Atlanta was in the Super Bowl, Carolina. But you know what I'm saying, though? I think that because the franchise makes so much money that we focus on that instead of the job that they actually do. This is a successful franchise, right? They're successful at winning games. They're successful at winning divisions.
No, I don't think you can say you're successful if you win a bunch of regular season games.
They won 2 out of the last 3 years. They won the division.
They get what they want.
I'm just asking.
I know, but they also spent the previous 10 years not winning the division very often.
I guess
this is a
the
recent
Jason
thing.
Garrett administration was an 8-8, an 8-8.
Sure. So Mike McCarthy's sustained now a winning program over the last 3 years. I guess my question back would be,
if they were just a normal family running this team.
Yeah. Well,
if they were the Brown family, the Hallises or the McCaskies.
Right. But all those families that you're bringing up have had more success technically over the
Bears,
last
85.
They've been to the Super Bowl. They've been to 2 NFC championship games since the Cowboys have last been to one. Now, they didn't win. So maybe ultimately if you win it, that's all that matters. But I think here as the Cowboy fans, we're like, damn, wouldn't it be nice to just see them play in an NFC championship game?
Sure. Anybody would like
championship weekend. There's people that are driving around right now that have never seen that in their entire life.
Yeah, and you could say that for probably several.
You think people are jealous of their money, so they're mad at them for not winning?
I think people are mad at them because they like to say they care only about, and rightfully so. I mean, if this is how you want to identify it, with the way they sell the stadium, the way they push the jerseys, the way they make money. The way they make money, but they also make money. Their product, though, still manages to win. Does it win championships? Does it win playoffs? No, it doesn't.
See, I think that's part of their frustration. If they're thinking like me, I believe it's by design to make the most possible money. I think if you took money out of the equation, they would win Super Bowls.
No,
but they're building this to make money as their priority, not win the Super Bowl.
Right.
And that you can't serve two masters. You got to pick one.
Well, see,
I think they're the only team in the NFL that does this.
But they're winning division. And I know it's not. We're complaining about it because they're not winning Super Bowls or NFC titles and stuff like that.
Well, and I think the point is like, I don't know if you were about to say there's a lot of other teams fans that could say that, but there's not. In the NFC, there's one other team, and that would be Washington fans. Every other team in the last 28 years has gotten to watch their team at least play in an NFC championship game. Just recently here, the
Detroit Lions, right?
The Lions finally did it.
Yeah. See,
the only other team that could have said that was the Lions.
Because when teams are good, they sign the players they need. Every other team does it.
If this team wasn't making the money they were, I wonder if we'd think about them differently. That's all I would say.
I think we probably would.
I would think of them as even bigger losers than they are.
That's fair. I would rather, but the wins and losses doesn't show that.
Sure, it does. Your playoff record is determining it to me. That's how I define it. Maybe you want to make them winners because they win in the regular season. I'm not going to go that far.
No. I'm
I
just
think
saying,
that's just a different kind of loser.
They win. But they win. They win their division more times than not.
I understand what you're saying. They field a competitive team more often than not. They're not the Browns like the Browns were for so long, where they're just they're picking in the top 5 year in, year out. They're the sewage of the sport. Like that's not what they are. They field a competitive team and they're fine. But like by and large, they're average. Sometimes you have a good regular season, sometimes you don't, and you never have a good postseason. It's like I
understand it's the problem. I just wondered if they weren't making. I think every NFL team makes money. They're just better at it than everybody else.
Here's, I guess, my question then. Would it be the Jones family still won those 3 Super Bowls? Jerry's still responsible for those. Sure. So no, he set the standard. That's what it was. The Cowboys won 2 Super Bowls in the 70s, right? They became America's team thanks to Tex Schramm.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Jerry takes over.
The explosion of the NFL.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jerry takes over, and with hiring Jimmy Johnson and those two together, they create a dynasty. They become the first to do 3 out of 4. They set the standard. The Cowboys standard is about winning championships. He said it himself. Win is the name of the game.
Sure.
Right? So since then, they have failed to achieve the standard that they set. So I think I would still be holding them accountable no matter what, if they were number 1 in terms of the most valuable franchise in sports or the 20th most valuable franchise in sports. To me, you have failed.